There is a manuscript, forbidden for over 1,000 years, that reveals exactly what happens in the first 49 days after you die. And no, it's not theory. It's not religious speculation. It's a detailed, step-by-step map of what your consciousness will experience when your last heartbeat stops. For centuries, only high-ranking Tibetan monks could access this knowledge. Any ordinary person who tried to read this text was prevented from doing so because what is written inside is so disturbing, so specific, that it can completely change the way you live right now, at this very moment. And here's the part nobody tells you. According to this manuscript, most people fail the death test. Not because they are bad, not because they have sinned, but because they don't know they are being tested. They go through the 49 days completely blind, reacting to illusions as if they were real, being pulled back into the cycle of rebirth without even realizing they had a choice. But if you know what to look for, if you recognize the signs this manuscript describes, there is a way out, a way to break the cycle forever. And it all begins with understanding what happens in the first second after you die. In 1927, an American anthropologist named Walter Evans Wentz was traveling through the Himalayas when he was introduced to a text that would change his life forever. Tibetan monks called it Bardo. In English, it means liberation through listening on the intermediate plane. In the West, it became known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But this was no ordinary book. Walter spent years trying to convince the lamas to let him translate the manuscript. They resisted. They said the knowledge was too dangerous for unprepared minds, that revealing these secrets to the Western world would be like handing over a map of a territory most people are not ready to explore. When he finally got the translation, Walter was disturbed, because what he read wasn't mystical poetry. It wasn't vague metaphors about heaven and hell. It was a protocol, a survival guide for the first 49 days after death, written with the precision of a technical manual. And the central message was clear: the moment of your death is not the end. It is the beginning of the most important test of your existence. A test that you will probably fail unless you know exactly what is coming. The manuscript describes that in the first moments after death, you won't simply disappear. You will remain conscious, but something strange will happen. You will realize you can no longer feel your body. You will try to speak to the people around you, but no one will answer. You will try to touch objects, but your hand will pass through everything as if it were made of mist. And then panic will begin to set in, because your brain, conditioned by decades of physical experience, will refuse to accept what is happening. You will try to go back home. You will follow your family. You will shout their names, but nothing will work. This is the first mistake, the first moment when most souls lose their way. Because instead of accepting the transition, they fight against it. And the more you fight, the deeper you are pulled into the illusions that follow. The manuscript describes that right after this initial moment of confusion, something extraordinary happens. A light, but not an ordinary light. A light so intense, so absolute, that all your sense of existence seems to dissolve within it. Tibetan texts call this the clear light of reality. And here's the secret that changes everything. If you recognize this light for what it truly is, if you surrender completely to it without fear, without resistance, you instantly transcend. You escape the cycle of birth and death forever. It is total liberation, happening in the first second after death. But almost no one recognizes it. Why? because we spend our entire lives being conditioned to fear the unknown. The moment the light appears, the soul panics. It clings to its memories, its identity, its unfinished desires, and the instant fear takes over, the light begins to fade. This is where the illusions begin. First, you will hear sounds, whispers, echoes of voices that seem familiar, but distorted, as if calling to you from behind a veil. The world around you will begin to change. Instead of light, you will begin to see shapes, patterns, shadows, glimpses of what appear to be people or places you have known. But none of that is real, not yet. The manuscript warns, your own mind is creating these visions, seeking something familiar to cling to, something that makes sense. And it is precisely this search for comfort that will trap you. Because what comes next is not comfortable. You are about to enter the Bardo. And the Bardo is no place of rest. It is a psychological battlefield where every hidden fear, every repressed desire, every lie you've told yourself will take shape before your eyes. And depending on how you react to it, you either break free forever or you fall back into the cycle, blind, forgetful, trapped in another life with no memory that you've ever been through this before. But there is something even more disturbing that the manuscript reveals. Something that happens between the 21st and 35th days of the Bardo. Something that not even the most prepared monks can get through without trembling. The Tibetan masters who preserved this manuscript for over 1,000 years left detailed records of what they witnessed while guiding souls through the Bardo. They weren't speculating, they were documenting. One of the oldest texts describes the account of a lama named Padmasambhava, considered the original guardian of this knowledge. He said that most people don't realize they are dead until at least the second week in the Bardo. They continue trying to interact with the physical world, confused as to why no one sees or hears them. But eventually, fulfillment arrives. And when it arrives, the bard changes. The manuscript explains that in the early days, the Bardo is relatively neutral. There is no physical pain, there is no direct suffering, only awareness. Some traditions describe it as floating through a vast open space, a formless void where thoughts spread like waves on an infinite ocean. But then slowly, the visions begin to emerge. First, the peaceful visions. Radiant beings appear, figures of light, emanating wisdom and compassion. Some interpret them as angels, others as enlightened masters. But the manuscript warns, these figures are not external entities. They are projections of your own higher consciousness. If you recognize this, if you understand that they are you in your purest form, you can merge with them. You can dissolve into higher consciousness and escape the cycle. But most hesitate. They doubt. And hesitation is all it takes. Perspectives change. The radiant beings begin to disappear. And in their place, wrathful visions emerge. The manuscript describes these entities in disturbing detail. Monstrous figures with multiple heads, countless arms, eyes that burn like fire. They roar with inhuman voices, their faces contorted in expressions of rage and chaos. They appear like demons, like executioners, like relentless pursuers, and they instill terror in the heart of the unprepared soul. But here's the secret that Tibetan masters emphasize above all. These terrifying entities are not real enemies. They do not exist outside your mind. They are projections of your own unresolved fear, your hidden guilt, your buried regrets. Every moment of deceit, cruelty, or selfishness from a past life takes shape in the Bardo, appearing as something external, something attacking. But the attack is self-created. The horror is self-inflicted. And the most dangerous part, the more you fight, the stronger the visions become. Fear fuels the illusion. Terror gives you power. The monks teach that the only way to escape is not to run, but to recognize. Those who perceive the truth, who understand that these entities are nothing more than shadows of the mind, see them dissolve instantly. Like sun-scorched mist, illusions vanish the moment the soul ceases to believe in them. But almost no one understands this in time. They only see the nightmare, not the lesson hidden within it. There is a specific phase of the Bard that the texts describe more carefully than any other. It happens around the 3rd or 4th week. It is called the Great Mirror. There is no judge. There is no divine court. There is no higher being deciding your fate. What happens next is far more profound and far more terrifying. The soul is forced to confront the full weight of its existence. At first, it seems like nothing is happening. The angry visions begin to fade. For a moment, the soul feels it has escaped. But then, a new experience takes over. More vivid, more intense than anything before. It's not a vision. It's not a dream. It's reliving it. The soul is pulled back in time through every action, every thought, every emotion it has ever created. But this is not memory. It is total immersion. The soul doesn't just remember what it has done in life. It experiences it all again, completely. Every moment of kindness, every act of cruelty, every decision made in secret is now felt completely, not just from your own perspective, but from the perspective of everyone you affected. If you caused pain, you will feel that pain. If you brought joy, you will feel that joy. But there is no filter. There is no way to justify or excuse past choices. Everything is raw, immediate, and undeniable. This is not punishment. It's the truth. The manuscript explains that for most, this experience is agonizing. We spend our lives avoiding responsibility for our actions, justifying our mistakes, burying our guilt. But in death, there is nowhere to hide. You can't explain why you acted that way. You can't argue, deflect, or reason out of it. You just feel it. For some, this experience is blissful. Those who have lived with compassion, honesty, and wisdom are flooded with peace, as each positive action returns to them like waves of light. But for others, it is a torment beyond anything they could imagine, not because they are being punished, but because the weight of their own actions falls upon them. And here's the part where the manuscript makes it clear. This review of life doesn't just affect the past. It also determines the future, because the moment the soul finishes reliving its entire existence, it is no longer at neutral. It is deeply conditioned by the emotions it has just re-experienced. If the soul emerges from this review filled with guilt, regret, or attachment, it will be pulled back into the cycle of reincarnation. The heavier the burden, the lower the realm to which it will return. But if the soul can accept its past without attachment, if it can release the burden of regret, fear, and unfulfilled desires, then it moves towards liberation. This is the real test, and this is where most people fail. Remember the anthropologist Walter Evans Wentz we mentioned at the beginning? After he translated the manuscript, something changed in him. His colleagues noticed. He stopped living with the same desperate urgency that consumes most people. He stopped fearing death. He stopped clinging to temporary things, because he understood something that most will never understand. The Bardo is not just a place in the afterlife. It's a state of mind. And the same illusions that deceive the soul in death are already deceiving us in life. The fear that keeps souls running from angry visions? It's the same fear that controls people every day. The attachment that pulls souls back to reincarnation. It's the same attachment that keeps people chasing money, fame, and temporary pleasures. The inability to recognize illusions. It's the same blindness that keeps people believing everything they're told, never questioning the reality in front of them. If you are not conscious now, you will not be conscious after death. That is why so few people escape. The manuscript teaches that the same habits, fears, and desires that shape our daily lives also shape what happens after we die. Those who live in ignorance die in ignorance. Those who are controlled by fear in life will be controlled by fear in death. And those who live chasing illusions will continue chasing them after the body is gone. The cycle is relentless. It's perfectly designed to keep us trapped. And the worst part, we're doing it to ourselves. But here's the truth. The cycle is not unbreakable. The Tibetan masters left these teachings for a reason, so that the few who are ready may awaken. And the first step is to see reality for what it truly is. Most people will continue living the way they always have. They will tell themselves that they have time, that they will think about death later, that there are more important things to focus on right now. And then, in an instant, their lives will end, and they will enter the Bardo as lost, as confused as every soul before them. But it doesn't have to be this way. Not for you. Because preparation doesn't happen after death. It happens while you're still here. And this preparation isn't about religion or dogma or rituals. It's about awareness. It's about seeing illusions for what they are. It's about freeing yourself from the fears, desires, and false identities that keep us trapped. Not just in this life, but in the next. So here is the ultimate truth that the manuscript reveals. The truth that has been hidden for over 1,000 years. Death doesn't change you, it only reveals you. The Tibetan Book of the Dead does not describe an afterlife in the way most people think. It does not promise a paradise for the good or a hell for the wicked. It does not pass judgment on anyone. Because the Bardo is not an external place. It is the mirror of your own consciousness. Everything you will experience after death, the clear light, the peaceful deities, the terrifying illusions, the review of life, and the pull toward reincarnation, is nothing more than a reflection of the mind you carried in life. If you lived in fear, you will die in fear. If you lived with attachment, you will die clinging to what is already gone. If you lived unconsciously, you will float through the afterlife in the same way, reacting, clinging, falling back into the cycle. But if you lived consciously, if you trained your mind to see through the illusion, if you prepared yourself while you were still alive, then in death you will recognize the Bardo for what it is. A test, a transition, an opportunity. And this is the secret hidden for over 1,000 years. The reason why these teachings were forbidden. Because if people knew the truth, they would stop fearing death. They would stop wasting their lives on things that don't matter. They would stop being controlled by false beliefs, by religious institutions, by governments that use fear to keep them obedient. A person who understands death is a person who cannot be manipulated. Because once you see the truth, once you understand that this life is just preparation for the next, everything changes. The way you think changes. The way you act changes. You no longer chase fleeting pleasures or meaningless distractions. You no longer fear loss because you know that nothing was ever truly yours to begin with. You no longer cling to identity because you realize it was never real. And when the moment comes, when you take your last breath and cross the threshold, you will not panic. You will not cling. You will not be pulled back into the cycle of oblivion. You will simply be aware. And with that awareness, you will have a choice, a real choice, to break free or to return. Most will never get to that point. They'll move on from this video, go back to their routines, forget everything they just learned, and when the time comes, they'll be unprepared. But you don't have to be, because now you know, and knowing is only the beginning. The question is no longer what happens after death. The real question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge now, while you still have time? So here's the truth that changes everything. You've just received information that most people will never have access to in their entire lives. Knowledge that has been locked away in monasteries, hidden from untrained eyes for over 1,000 years. But information without action is just entertainment. Tibetan masters knew that reading about the Bardo once doesn't pair anyone. That's why they spent years training their minds to recognize illusions before death arrived. And death doesn't warn you. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply arrives. If something within you recognized the truth in what has been said here, if you felt that this knowledge came to you for a reason, then don't let it die at this moment. Subscribe to the channel to don't miss the next episodes. Turn on notifications, because what you just learned is only the surface. There are much deeper layers that will be revealed in the next videos. Leave a like, because this simple gesture feeds the algorithm and allows this knowledge to reach more souls who need to awaken before it's too late. And share this video with someone you truly love. Because if what this manuscript says is true, you could literally be saving someone from thousands of years trapped in the cycle of oblivion. Most people will close this video and forget all about it in a few minutes. But you were called here for a reason. Don't waste this opportunity. Preparation begins now, and your next action determines everything.